Hey YouTube, it's Brandon Red here with Ramen Noodle Budgets, and today's tutorial we're going to be going over how to make Deckard's gun from the Blade Runner series. So to start off this build, you're going to want to get some type of Blade Runner style-esque gun, and the gun I got is in the description below. I actually purchased off Amazon. It's a really nice, pretty cool actually toy. It shoots and doesn't really shoot, it just kind of goes crazy when you press the trigger, but not bad for a toy gun. The first thing I want to do is unscrew any of the small screws and take off the slider. Is probably the first piece you're going to want to take off. And keep these pieces because you're going to need them later. Now make sure to hold on to all your screws because you are going to need them to put some pieces together later. And here you can see that there's some pieces holding it together that you're going to need to take off. Now on the inside there's a whole bunch of electronics and that weird kind of barrel piece, and you're going to want to take all of that out. It's pretty simple, nothing was really stuck in. The few pieces you are going to want to keep though are the button or the battery terminals that kind of just connect the batteries, because we are going to use this whole battery module later to work with the lights. You can throw the rest of it out, but I actually did hold on to the wires because I was too lazy to go out and buy wires later, but yeah. Now I put the gun back together without the screws of course, and was kind of looking at what needed what. And I noticed that a few pieces were probably going to need to be worked with, especially these slider pieces. So you're going to want to push out the orange pieces, and they come out really easily with a screwdriver, just knock it out. And you can put those on there. And yeah, we're going to need to fill in the barrel later, which I go in all about. But here I was kind of just figuring out what needed to be done.
Alright, so I've been looking at some of the photos, all my reference photos, and I figured out we're going to have to do a lot of dremeling and reattaching and dremeling, and a lot of stuff is going to have to go down with this. So the first thing I think I'm going to do is take these two halves apart again and Dremel down the firing pin here, as the gun in the picture does not have it. And we're also going to have to, on these two slider pieces, is get rid of the sight and try and Dremel out the hole here so that we can put the pieces in for the internal part so it has the real big main look. So that's what we're going to do next.
Alright, so I looked at some of the reference photos and realized that there needed to be some type of barrel piece that needs to go in there. So this whole piece kind of had to be cut out. So using my Dremel, which is the first time I actually ever Dremeled off plastic pieces off of toys, it went off so easily like butter. And I took out some pieces of the slider as well, but I didn't realize that underneath the sight it was hollow, so some pieces kind of fell in. And here I got a 1/2 inch PVC pipe, and that fit perfectly to create the barrel. And I kind of cut it to shape, and I also found that I could put another one in the top slider which would fill in the window piece right there and also add in the barrel of course for the top section. Now luckily I was done with my ketogenic diet, and my ketone strips bottle, they fit perfectly in there. So to add the pipe into the slider, I used some Epoxy Sculpt, which I never worked with before, but I actually quite like it. It has like a 12-hour work time, which kind of sucked because this took me like 2 minutes to do. But yeah, I also added in a smaller PVC pipe inside of the 1/2 inch to add the second kind of inner barrel. Now before I could glue anything together, I had to add in the electronics. So on the actual gun there were these little nodes where the LEDs were actually supposed to be, and using my Dremel and a drill I kind of drilled those in. Now I put in the batteries and kind of wired everything up in a simple LED diagram with 4 of the red, because I tried to add the green and the 3 AA batteries weren't enough to power it, so I just worked with the 4 LEDs. I put those in, kind of see how they look. They look pretty great, and I used the original trigger mechanism so that I didn't have to add in a switch. It was the original trigger mechanism that was built with the gun, and then I epoxied everything together so I could begin to work on the outside of the gun. Now I used some normal plumber's epoxy because I needed to add some areas for structure so I could build on top of, because the Epoxy Sculpt wouldn't hold, and that dried in like 15 minutes. So I put it in some spots that needed to hold the gun up a little bit more, and in some spots that were hollow. Now I began to mold the Epoxy Sculpt onto spots, trying to get the basic shape, and it was a little hard to work with because I'm really good at sculpting but not good at sculpting kind of mechanical looking pieces. So after that was dry, I sanded it and I taped off the LEDs pretty poorly and gave it just a coat of primer to see really what I needed to do, what areas needed more work. I found it kind of hard to find certain reference photos for certain sides, like the one side of the gun with the actual barrel part, not this side. That was kind of hard to find pictures for. Most of the pictures with that. So I actually had to elongate the trigger guard. So I got some of my 1/4" PVC, flattened it after I heated it, and then I saw that was the perfect width for the piece, so I shaped that with a heat gun, and then I super glued that in place. And I was actually amazed how easy and how well that looked in the end. I then began to add more pieces onto my epoxy sculpt after the first set of primer, and I actually added in some random pieces I found in my junk drawers from old builds. That piece actually right there is a Darth Vader lightsaber screw that I had when I was doing a mod. So I added more pieces, and I actually added in the second trigger, which is another piece of the pipe that with more epoxy sculpt. Now I actually added some random pieces on there, like that was a googly eye and a pencil internals to add some more detail. And then I added some glazing and spot putty all over the gun so that I would smooth out and fill in any small holes that I couldn't reach. After that, I primed it once again and then hit it with some metallic black. It was actually called metallic bronze, but that's definitely black paint. And it was definitely starting to look like the gun. Now, to fill in some areas that needed to be silver, I actually used Rub and Buff, which is the first time ever using this as well, and I quite liked it. I added it to random spots that weren't in the pictures because it made the gun look a little more metallic and actually look like metal. Now, I also noticed in some other reference photos that the top slider was actually a little lighter than the rest of the gun, so I hit it with some of this metallic slight gray. Now, for the handle, the grips, I just taped off the rest of the gun and then hit it with some primer because there was some like fingerprints and stuff on it, and I wanted it to just be really smooth because they're supposed to look like resin. I then hit it with silver and then let that dry for a while. I went out to Lowe's and found this sea glass amber, which is it's like a clear amber paint for kind of painting glass. I then taped off the bottom bit and then hit it with this stuff, and it kind of just turned into a brown color, but it was pretty much the closest I could find. I know there was this orange color, but it was a little bit too orange. I then hit it with some clear coat, the gloss clear coat, to also enhance that resin look it's supposed to have. And at that point, the gun was pretty much done. I was super happy with the way it came out. This took me about 3 days, one of the longer builds, but it was because of the epoxy sculpt wait times. But yeah, that's about it. I hope you guys are excited for Blade Runner 2049 as much as I am, and I hope you enjoyed this build. So request more builds, subscribe, like, and thanks so much for watching, guys.